मानवर डॉक्टर चंद्र मित्रा जी, डॉक्टर बजरंगलाल गुप्त जी, श्री श्याम खोसला जी, प्रोफेसर ब्रिजकिशोर कुठियाला जी और श्री केशव खुराना जी, और बहनों और भाइयों, मुझे बहुत प्रसन्नता की बात है कि आपके दर्शन करने का मौका मिला। बहुत वर्ष पहले यहाँ आया था। चंडीगढ़ एक ऐसा स्थान है जिसके लिए बहुत स्नेह की बात मन में आती है। यहाँ विद्यार्थी परिषद के उत्सव पर आने का मौका मुझे मिला था और आज आपने जो कहा, जो दिया, I'm deeply honored and privileged and overwhelmed. इससे पहले कि मैं अपने कुछ शब्द आपके सामने रखूं, दो तीन बातें कहना चाहूंगा। पहली बात तो ये कि बहुत वर्षों से मैं भारत से बाहर हूं। 50 साल हो गए भारत आता जाता रहता हूं। भारत के संबंध में जो घटनाएं होती हैं उनको बहुत करीब से देखने का, सुनने का मौका मिलता है, किंतु बाहर हूं। और दूसरी बात यह कि अभी भी दिल से, हृदय से भारतीय हूं। भारत के संबंध में जो श्रद्धा है, भारत के संबंध में जो स्नेह है, उसमें कोई कमी नहीं। और इसके कारण आज जो शब्द मैं कहूंगा वो कुछ सब्जेक्टिविटी उसमें आएगी। कितना ऑब्जेक्टिव हूं मैं, ये कहना कठिन होगा मेरे लिए, किंतु मन से भारतीय हूं। भारतीय पासपोर्ट 50 साल से अपने पास है और भारतीय सिटीजन हूं। इस नाते से आपसे बात करने में मुझे प्रसन्नता होती है। और एक बात और कि हिंदी बोलने में कुछ कठिनाई आनी शुरू हुई है। बहुत वर्षों से बोलने का मौका नहीं मिला, इसलिए वो हिंदी में जो फ्लो चाहिए वो बहुत बार नहीं आता। और इसलिए आपसे क्षमा चाहूंगा कि अगर आप मुझे परमिट मी तो अंग्रेजी में बात करूंगा। Do I have your permission? All right, since you permit me, I am going to speak in English. And the subject that you have given me, I'm delighted to hear that, because that is an issue on which today the debate has begun. It is open and now people talk about it. And those who look at India and have been watching it for quite some time, they certainly have many questions, and at the same time they have certain suggestions from the outside. I do not feel competent that sitting there I am the one to tell you what to do. But at the same time I do have some thoughts about what is going on, and I am honored to share those with you. Having said that, let me just begin. Looking at India's geostrategic challenges, I look at them in the context of major international and Asian geostrategic issues. What do I mean by that? Internationally, where India sits geographically, where India stands geopolitically, I think we cannot and we must not ignore that there are certain countries that India, even if it doesn't want to, has to be concerned with. Their interests, their concerns, and especially if I name these big countries, US, China, Russia. And if you look at Asia, sitting in this very tough neighborhood, you cannot ignore what, again, Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, because they are going to play a major role in what India does geopolitically, what India does in its foreign policy. And you can't ignore again Japan, South Korea, maybe Taiwan, Singapore. There are many countries that are equally important players. And at home, the strategy that India crafts, and that strategy has to be in light of its geography, in light of its own political, economic, security interests, and that will determine, obviously, its place in the international arena. If I have to provide a context for my remarks, there would be that, first of all, these are predictions by those self-proclaimed pundits who keep telling us there is going to be a precipitous decline of the United States in the days to come, or in the near future. I would suggest to you that those predictions are premature. Second, I want to say that the United States and India, they do have a common interest in engaging China. अभी खोसा जी ने चाइना का जिक्र किया, तो आज सुबह भी मैं इंडियन एक्सप्रेस में पढ़ रहा था, China and India are friends and not foes. And you know that is true. That you have got to engage China diplomatically, you have to engage China at the present time commercially, you have to engage China in a systematic way, but culturally. But at the same time, I think we need to understand that China could be a partner, but China is a rival. And that rivalry is going to stay, because both of these countries are going to vie for energy, they are going to vie for political influence in this region, and they are both potential superpowers. And so obviously, when you think about countries, and those who say, you know, there are not friendships, there are interests that bind them. And obviously from Kautilya to others who have been telling us about foreign policies and political astuteness and what it means in a context, we need to listen to them. Third, I think I need to suggest in terms of the context that what we have heard about the Arab Spring, that it has got its own thorns. This morning you saw in the paper that President Morsi of Egypt has decided that he might even impose martial law. You can see that these positions, they are reversed. There was a time when about Mubarak and Mubarak's repressive policies were being challenged all over the world. And today, the Islamist President Morsi, with Muslim Brotherhood having usurped all the state's powers in his own hands and trying to impose upon the country a constitution which is being drafted primarily by Muslim Brotherhood, and where Coptics, where liberals, where these young people who were in the vanguard of this opposition to Mubarak, they simply walked out of that constituent assembly. And so that is the situation in Egypt. But you look around that part of the world, in Tunisia, in Libya, and today especially in Syria, you find total, utter chaos at times. And the point simply is that NATO did take action in Libya, talked about a new norm in international law, responsibility to protect. And that norm was that each country as a sovereign has certain rights, but it has got a duty. And duty is responsibility to protect its own people. And if the country cannot do that, is unwilling to do that, then that responsibility, if it's manifestly unwilling or unable to do that, then that responsibility devolves upon the international community. But that happened in Libya for the first time. There is no possibility that in Syria, international community under the Security Council's auspices can intervene. Russia and China have vetoed every resolution that was likely to be put before the Security Council in order even to put some sanctions against the repressive regime of Assad. And obviously, Syria is not Libya. Now, I won't dwell upon it, but it has got a big army. Within the country, there are at the present time ethnic conflicts. The Alawites find themselves in life and death struggle. Shiite and Sunnis are at each other's throats. Kurds are not very happy. And then there is the possibility that the conflict might spill into that region, might engulf the entire area. Look where Syria sits. Syria sits next to all these countries: Israel, Turkey, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon. And you can see how explosive the entire issue can become. And so at the present time, all that I'm saying is that in that part of the world, as the thought was that democracy is going to come to all these Arab countries, there is an awakening. There are all those kind of flowers springing up. There are thorns. There are issues that at the present time we don't have any insight into how they are going to shape up. And then the entire Middle East, I don't need to dwell upon it, but Israel, Palestine, and all that has been happening at the UN and in that region. And India cannot simply sit by idly. You have to take some kind of action at times. That's the need of the hour. Fourth, I would simply provide the context on terrorism. It's a menace for humanity. India has been touched by it, not simply touched, but India has been very, very deeply hurt by it. How to respond to that terrorism is going to continue to be an issue. And finally, if I've got to provide context, there are plenty of other issues. But look at Pakistan. Its obsession in terms of its Videsh Niti simply with India is not going to go away. Irsha, looking at India economically growing, politically reaching out in this region, other countries looking at India as a potential superpower, even talking about the Security Council and a permanent seat. That doesn't sit well with the ISI. It doesn't sit well with those people who have total obsession with India. And so that is going to continue with its own efforts to find China to assist it, and China continues to provide that kind of assistance. And I think I'm going to leave it all out because I was going to talk about Afghanistan as the United States pulls out its troops, what is going to be happening to Afghanistan, Pakistan, and all those issues. Let me then start by talking about meeting these kind of problems and challenges and chunautiyan. And I would simply say that in order to effectively address these external challenges, you know it better than I do, that internal needs are obvious. And that is where the rest of the world keeps looking at you. That India needs a body politic, both at the center and the states, which has got things that unfortunately haven't been seen. And let me simply rattle them off without going into any details. You know them better than I do. Good governance, not much corruption, able to tame security challenges from Maoists and Naxalites in Chhattisgarh, unrest in the northeast, an economy that keeps going. This morning, Khosaji talked about all this debate on FDI. And I simply want to say a couple of words that I mentioned to him. I said one thing, that it's globalization is a juggernaut. That juggernaut cannot be stopped. I remember the debate in this country on the World Trade Organization. And the point simply is that each country must decide how to respond to that juggernaut. I mentioned to Khosaji that in my neighborhood in Denver, we decided we did not want Walmart to be there. And we stopped Walmart. And the reason we stopped Walmart in the United States, where it comes from, was simple. There are those mom and pop shops, small stores. They are going to go out of business. We didn't want that to happen. And so, FDI, if it comes, US permits it, Europe permits it, but remember, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, economies that are booming, for many, many years, they had a protectionist stance. So India needs to decide how, under what conditions, what terms it's going to permit that kind of FDI. In the retail area, what are going to be the limits? And here, the major issue that comes up is, how do you regulate it? How do you monitor it? How do you supervise it? And what does that demand? That demands honest people who are skilled to be able to do that. And that obviously nobody from outside is going to tell you how to do that. How to see that people who are honest, they govern. How to make sure that our voices are heard. How to make sure that PANCHNAD and civil society has a rigor and a vigor that nobody can stop. And unless civil society stands up and takes a stand, then obviously those who are governing can be governing with repression and nothing can be done about it. Let me then move on what the prerequisites are in order to meet these challenges on the international front. I would say, first of all, we were talking about being soft, but there is one place for soft, and that is for soft power. India must project its soft power abroad. Well, what is soft power? It is the power of attraction that countries can do because they have got an admirable culture, they have got traditions, they have got institutions, and they do not have people be afraid of them. Who has been afraid of India in this neighborhood? Southeast Asia is full of those symbols of Indian culture and tradition. Who in the world ever had said Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam? And Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam means simply, as you know, that the entire humanity is one family. If one part of the family suffers, the entire family suffers. Who is the one who said, Sarve bhavantu sukhina, sarve santu niramaya? Not simply for ourselves, we want the entire world to be prosperous. We said to the entire world, we want everyone to be noble. We said to the entire world that Indian culture, Indian civilization doesn't go out with hard power troops crossing the borders, but this is a place where you have given soft power all these years, and that needs to be done. I need to say it's not कोई नई बात नहीं है. You had our own revered leader Atal Bihari Vajpayee at one time talk about neighborhood, and he was visionary to focus the country's foreign policy on India's neighbors. Former President Abdul Kalam officially endorsed India's Look East policy in 2006. So the need is, in order to have India be able to have its soft power in this region spread. Second, I would say that India must, without compromising on its interests or values, see that countries that are at the present time in the international arena putting their heavy weight on among China, Russia, United States and others, especially in this neighborhood also, how to balance our own interests. US and India, I live there, so I'm biased in that sense, but there are some common interests. India needs to keep its own foreign policy independent, but at the same time, when there are common interests, we need to work together. I know that in the past, the United States at times has put its weight on, and in a fashion where India did not find it very pleasant. And the United States changed its own policies. We give you an example, Myanmar, Burma. The President of the United States came to Cambodia and Burma for the first time, any president. Changed its policy. But it had asked the Indian government to be very careful not to move in Burma very fast. The United States needs to think about its own tax policies, its social security pertaining to people from outside the country who go there, work for 2 years, pay all the social security there, and that doesn't sit well. So I think with India, we need to have tough bargaining at times, but India needs to be able to work with the United States. And talking of the United States, I want to give you very good news. You probably have seen that the first Hindu American in Congress has been elected. Her name is Tulsi Gabbard. She is from Hawaii, Honolulu. She is going to take oath in the United States Congress on Bhagavad Gita. Last Saturday, I was with her in Washington, D.C. Talking with her, she said to me, she said, you know, my guides have been Lord Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. And she is a person who has got no connection with India as such. Her father is a Samoan Catholic. Her mother is from Michigan. And she got interested in Hinduism with the Hare Krishna movement. Her mother gave all the 5 children Hindu names. And she is the one who is guided by Lord Krishna and Bhagavad Gita. And I asked her, I said, look, it's wonderful that you are doing it. She's only 31 years old. At 21, she was the youngest one who got elected to the state assembly in Hawaii. And I gave her unsolicited advice. I said, I don't usually give it. I'm a law teacher. I give advice only when asked. And then I charge a lot of money. No, I don't. I'm very reasonable. But I told her, I said, this is unsolicited advice. Don't change. Because all of us have, but I have many close friends, personal friends, not simply in my own professional setting, but good personal friends who are in the Senate, U.S. Senate, who are in Congress. And I told her, I said, I haven't seen a single person who didn't change after coming to Washington, and I don't want you to change. And I said, in 10 years, I'll still be kicking. I'll ask you, and I'll monitor that you have not changed. that you still think that Lord Krishna and Bhagavad Gita, they are the ones who are going to guide you. But in any event, that is a setting that I want you to know about the United States. I think I need to move on and probably in 5 or 10 minutes conclude it, but let me say a few more things. Let me take China, because I think that's important. And with all those surveillance ships that Khosaji talked about in South China Sea and its territorial claims there, and as you probably know that with Japan in the East China Sea, it has got problems. But more than that at the present time, it has got problems with Vietnam, with Taiwan, with Malaysia, with Philippines, all those neighboring countries, because it's making pretty extensive territorial claims in the South China Sea and East China Sea. And you probably saw that last 2-3 days, it has given some warnings to Indian naval commanders and naval secretary. As you probably saw that Joshi ji, he had said that India is going to spend a whole lot of money on submarines, that India is going to have naval power extended. And this morning as we were coming in, our esteemed president asked me about India's role in the oceans and Indian Ocean, and I was going to talk about Indian Ocean a little. He's going to talk about it, so I think I'll skip that. But I will talk about that South China Sea. And in South China Sea, as you probably know, two things that India is very, very interested in. One is that we, because of our own trade needs, energy needs, our own interests, India's interests in that part of the world, we do want freedom of the seas. That is a fundamental, basic principle of international law. If there are going to be any disputes, they ought to be decided by the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea. But as you probably know, recently, there was in Cambodia a conference of the ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, those 10 countries. The United States came there. Cambodia has been getting a lot of aid from China. Cambodia said last July also, when the foreign ministers of ASEAN met, that all these disputes in South China Sea, that they should be decided bilaterally and there should not be any internationalization of these disputes. And so the final communique last July did not even mention it. United States has been asking that there be internationalization of all these conflicts because they go from border to border, and you shouldn't have bilateral decisions but international decisions. China doesn't want it. And as you probably know, in that part of the world, South China Sea, its territorial claims are total, saying the entire area belongs to us. On territorial issues, China does not want to compromise. Look at Aksai Chin. That area, you probably know about it after the 62 war, and this is the 50th year of all that happened at that time. And that is junction of Pakistan, Tibet and India. It's 38,000 square kilometers territory currently being administered by China. And then, as you know, in Arunachal Pradesh, bordering on Bhutan, Bangladesh, Myanmar and China, China calls it South Tibet. And this is the 90,000 square kilometers area. So, we need to think about it. We mean CRI talking about India, how to deal with that. There are possible ways of doing it. One is to defer to China. I don't think that anybody would like that. Second is simply confrontation. We're not keen to do that. But I think here there is that kind of soft power And to start with a not big stick, but a small stick. China is sending its own surveillance ships in South China. And I think we can send squadrons, small ones, because don't need to send the huge ships there. China doesn't do that. China feels that simply to give an impression that we mean business. And there are those ships standing outside. Need be, we can bring them in. India can do the same thing. But at the same time, my own feeling very, very strongly is that in the Arctic, where at the present time, you know, the sea is, the ice is melting, it's becoming navigable, there is a great deal of potential of energy. India needs to be there. India needs to be in South China Sea. About Indian Ocean, our esteemed president is going to talk about it. I'll leave it for you. But here I would simply say that India's history, its tradition, its past that is so glorious, with sending all these exchanges, cultural, and at the same time trying to have in this neighborhood a great deal of camaraderie and friendship established by India. I think that gives it the ability to project its soft power in the region. A big, powerful country, glorious history, respecting all religions, cultures, treating all neighbors with dignity and as equals, never using force against another country. And so my own feeling is that it can use diplomacy. It can use its relations. It can even deploy forces in the area, and nobody is going to be afraid of them. So in this Southeast Asia, up to the Middle East, India needs to have its own potential power become a reality. And that at the present time, India does need. Let me just conclude by saying a couple more things. You know that nature of security has changed. We do talk today in terms of human security. And by human security, focus is on food, on energy, on climate, on environment, on disease. And these are the risks that you have got to take into account. And I think again India needs to be quite aware of where it stands in that part. A foreign policy for India that obviously furthers its own interests, strengthens its domestic principles, institutions, embodies its values and traditions, also strengthens the international system, upholds international law. That is what the Indian foreign policy in geopolitical, geostrategic setting needs. And so let me conclude in sum. If the present century is going to be the Asian century, if history of this century is going to be written here in this continent, then India must take the lead to ensure that the century embodies India's values of freedom, of openness, of democracy, of human dignity, of prosperity and peace for all. India is the one that said, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti all the time. But kindly keep in mind that at the same time, what Teddy Roosevelt at times said, carry a big stick. Carry a big stick. If you don't carry a big stick, that softness does not work. So I would simply say, speak softly, have soft power projected, carry a big stick. Thank you.